This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 5th of October 2020, and I am 2J.
I'm 2.
And I am DM. Let's take a look at today's headlines on the Daily Nation. Outrage as fight takes deadly turn. The Standard, the pride and shame of Kenya. And in the Star, Kidero and Uhuru eyed in rent row. What's happening with the deadly fight?
No, people, 2 young souls yesterday lost their lives over a clash that was completely unnecessary. And yesterday, on Sunday, in a place called Kenol in Muranga, Tanga men and women decided to shambulia some government supporters, and it resulted in the deaths of 2 young souls. Now, I'm going to say the following. This is 2 strikes, and 2 strikes full of provocation by the Deputy President. Strike 1 was going to the Jubilee office in the absence of the President, and this was by William RUTO. And I think there he was trying to provoke the President. Strike 2 is going to this church function in Kenol in Muranga, which is the President's backyard. And then when 2 people die, he continues to go and hold impromptu rallies saying that whatever happens, I must be boss in 2022.
Yeah, he said his State House journey is unstoppable.
He's unstoppable, meaning he will do anything to ensure he gets to the presidency. Is this necessary? Is this responsible of him? I do not know.
I think that's what rubbed me the wrong way. I think that we have to have some human decency. And I think that if 2 people die, the respectful, sensible thing to do is to stop all events, stop all actions, and address that issue. To then continue and proceed to rally and try to, garner support, garner money, that's so disrespectful.
It is.
Yeah. I think for me, it doesn't even matter which side instigated the violence, because whichever way, it's not justified. But even reading the Standard, because it's talking about the same thing, they're saying that the Standard is saying that the one thing that the politicians from the Tanga and the Keleweke side agree upon is that it is one of them, one of their kind. It is a politician that designed the chaos to happen on that day. And the thing is, this really better not be a preview of what's to come in 2022. But if we are to be very honest with ourselves, it is heralding chaos and deadly pandemonium come election year. I think in 2013, as ironic as it sounds, it is The Hague that saved us. It is The Hague that saved us from chaos, because the object of aggression was external. So we banded together, we in our ethnic nations that are usually at loggerheads, as we saw in 2007 at deadly loggerheads, we came together to say we're a sovereign nation, so we will elect these people whether we're told that choices have consequences or not. However, now the object of aggression is no longer, or at least for 2022, is no longer overseas. It is back home, and it is now each other. And I think that knowledge really makes the case for the BBI, because this kind of I have to be president by tooth or nail, and this is not an indictment on William RUTO. This is not an indictment of anybody who has presidential ambition. I'm just talking about how our system is currently constituted, and the high volatility. We can bet. We can bet that when in 2022, what happened at Kenol over the weekend will happen at a grander scale.
And I think what's scary is how early it's happening. I think if we look back at 2007, I don't think we saw signs of violence in 2005. So to say we're 2 years out and we're already seeing action like this,
that's a bad sign. It's very ominous. It's extremely ominous.
You see, it's taking a turn here. These are Kikuyus fighting Kikuyus. All right. Now, what is we're in the business of hypothesizing scenarios. Look, if this is happening, Kikuyu against Kikuyu, what's going to happen, in my view, is a class war. And the grounds are being prepared. When you start saying that that it is your turn, people, to take this power. You people, who children of Boda, people, children of Mama Mboga, you are preparing the ground for class war. And look, if you look at every middle income place in Nairobi, for example, Karen is bordered by Kibera, Muthaiga is bordered by Mathare, Kawangware borders Lavington, Mountain View borders Kangemi. What you're seeing here is if something small triggers a flash of violence, what will happen will be an overrun of this middle income, this middle class areas, this uppity kind of neighborhoods. And you don't want that. You don't want that kind of scenario, because you can find guys with crude weapons right outside your gate saying, now, because we were told we are poor because you're rich, we have come to take what is ours. That is, I suspect, where we're going. And that is even more powerful than ethnic clashes. That kind of narrative is more powerful than being told tribe A fighting
when
tribe
it comes
B.
to livelihood and well-being.
Yes.
Economic well-being.
And William Ruto must be watched very carefully.
And I think what you're saying, the worst thing about that kind of narrative is that it's a lie.
Yes.
Because attacking somebody in their household will not then ensure that prosperity will come following right behind you.
Absolutely.
So I think, that's something that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, so this is sad times. Let's move on to the Star. Kidero and Uhuru eyed in Rentra. What's happening there?
The story is very strange. So the Star is telling us that President Uhuru's personal assistant, Jomo Geshaga, and former Nairobi Governor Evans Kidero are in the middle of a rent row. And it is about 950,000 shillings. So the story goes as follows. Jomo, through a company called JSTA, rented an apartment that belongs to Evans Kidero. And they say that due to the outbreak of COVID, they weren't able to meet their rent obligations. So they came up with some form of an agreement confirming that they would be able to pay at least 250,000 shillings between September and December while the economic condition got better. And so I think now they're trying to take him to court, they're asking him to renovate the home and move out immediately. But of course, that is not how it works. Interestingly, okay, I don't know what the Star is doing here. Jomo Geshaga is Uhuru Kenyatta's nephew. So for them to not say who Jomo really is, to call him his PA, to call him an Uhuru aide, are they exercising restraint? Is it sneaky? I think
they're exercising restraint because I think there's more to this story. This is just the first in a series of mini dramas that they're going
are soon to come.
Are soon to come. But I also, it's very strange. It's 950,000 shillings. And then I think the landlord, in this case Kidero, I know he's smart, so he's actually risking that moment when this case appears before the landlord and tenant tribunal. He's risking having the lower hand because already the tenant is being defamed. Is this story headline worthy? Is my question.
That is a good.
So that means
it is not.
It's crafted for a particular reason.
Let me tell you, it's mischief. And if you notice, it's like this: the editor at the Star lives in space, because last week on Friday, the other dailies were reporting that Jubilee House had been invaded by William Ruto. The
Star was talking about
Jackson Kibor.
Yes.
Now they are talking about Kidero and Jomo Geshaga here. Well, they missed what happened yesterday, which should have been highlighted. Which it also tells you that hypothetically William Ruto may have some. I think that is what it points to. I think that when you are failing to acknowledge the news of the moment and focus on other, trivial small gossip items, you do decoys.
You're showing who your paymaster is.
So which headline is topical, speculative, which one is repetitive or groundbreaking, and finally which headline is thoughtful or just plain lazy?
I would actually like to propose the Standard as the losing headline, and this is why. The pride and shame of Kenya, if we can have that come back on the screen. If you look at it, I think the most focal point is that of Bridget Koskei and Eliud Kipchoge. When I first saw this headline, and I think many people know this by now, Bridget Koskei won the London Marathon over this weekend, and Koskei had to pull out due to, I think there was some health. Kipchoge. He came out because of some health concerns. So when I saw the pride and shame, I thought that they were calling Kipchoge the shame of Kenya.
Oh no.
And that made me so sad. So I think for just having a purely misleading headline, I think that if they wanted to focus on what happened in Murang'a, focus on Murang'a. If you want to focus on the London Marathon, focus on the London Marathon. Don't bring two things together.
So for that reason, we will toss only the Standard. They get a losing headline, and also the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to analyze them for you. What's the criteria, guys?
It is thoughtful.
Is it funny?
Or is it?
Let's look at the cartoons as you think about that. What's happening in the Daily Nation?
Daily Nation, IGA, and it's the logo of it's actually Jubilee Building, Pangani Building, and the logo, which is hands shaking each other, has been turned to people fighting each other,
swearing,
and swearing at each other, which is quite apt in the situation we are in right now. We have a dissident deputy president.
I want to challenge that narrative. I really do.
Why?
I do not think that
he's gone rogue.
Yes, he has gone rogue. But do we have any evidence showing that his opponent in this case, as Iga wants us to believe, his opponent, who would be Uhuru Kenyatta, has then gone back and has attacked him, right? To me, Deputy President William Ruto is nothing but a screaming victim. Yes. He goes to Jubilee House and he tries to start a coup. What happens? The right reaction is that Raphael Tuju asks for his removal.
Absolutely.
He goes to Murang'a and he sort of, instigates a fight and fails to be respectful. What does he expect to be next? He's just a crying baby.
So Iga's cartoon does not depict reality.
Good.
In the Standard, we have Trump in a hospital ICU bed being treated for COVID-19, and he's still denying the existence of COVID-19, saying this is a hoax, it's fake news, the virus will disappear pretty soon.
I think that's distasteful. It is showing someone already indisposed here, and the truth of the matter is he's not
really indisposed.
No, he's not. Yeah, Trump is not. He's been appearing in cameras. He looks healthy.
Yeah, this is all about theatrics. So
Gado, it's a rubbish cartoon. The Star Ozone, you have caricature of William Ruto, David Murathe, and Raphael Tuju there, and Ruto is endeshing his wheelbarrow. And Tuju is changing the signs from Jubilee to Kopamoja to Ruto has been banned from Jubilee. And Murathe is there saying, are the signs clearer now?
I think what is so funny about this cartoon is how gleeful Murathe is.
So happy.
And putting an actual no Ruto sign on the door.
That's a fantastic cartoon.
I mean, what does he expect?
It's a great
funny
cartoon.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yes.
So the Star gives us our winning cartoon. Definitely. So before we get on to our final thought, I'd like to remind our viewers to please subscribe to our YouTube channel. So what's our final thought?
Our final thought, it is inspired by a book entitled The Democracy Project, A History, a Crisis, a Movement, by David Graeber.
Yeah, and just for people's information, David Graeber actually passed away a couple of weeks ago, last month I believe, late last month, yeah. And apart from this book, he actually wrote DM's favorite book of the year, Debt, The Last 5,000 Years. Yeah, so I guess he's an author who we really like. So he was in fact an anthropologist, and in this book he gives an inside account of the Occupy Wall Street movement. And he was actually very involved in the early days of the Occupy Wall Street movement, and so this book evaluates the movement, but ultimately he ends up endorsing direct democracy. So those are two things we'll look into. But first I think we should start with what was the Occupy Wall Street movement. So it was the name given to the 2011 non-violent protest movement that was organized to address the perceived inequalities of the US financial system. And this was following the financial crash, but also the recession that happened between 2007 and 2010. So on September 17th, 2011, these protesters set up a base camp of tents and sleeping bags at Zuccotti Park in Lower Manhattan in New York. And so the date chosen, very interestingly, was the anniversary of the signing of the US Constitution. And so the protest then went and renamed this park Liberty Park. And the focus of the protest was framed as a class conflict between the ultra-wealthy 1% and the remaining 9% of Americans who believed that they had been left behind by a corrupt political system that was focused on greed and power. The movement only physically on the ground lasted for about 2 months before they were evicted by the government. But this book addresses that it's far too early to assess the impacts of the Occupy Wall Street movement. So instead he looks on to decipher the complicated nature of democracy. So he says in the book that to explain the meaning and value of democracy, that he then presents the history of the word democracy and anarchy. And he says that these two words, the way that they've been taught to us in our history lessons, are very different to how they actually originated. He says that democracy was initially a derogatory term that was used interchangeably with the word anarchy by ruling elites. So critics would often call democracy anarchy, or they would call a democrat an anarchist, which today is something that we really would not understand. And he says that since then, democracy has taken on a positive connotation, and anarchy has developed a negative one, where people are assumed to be, violent. And he says that democracy was originally a belief. The original conception of democracy was a belief that people are equal and should be left alone to manage their own collective affairs. And he says anarchy reflected the same kind of ideal, in that the origin of the word, or what the word simply meant, was to have people living without rulers, that people should live in a free society where they can make decisions based on consensus rather than on voting. And so what is the solution that Graeber gives us? His solution is direct democracy, also known as pure democracy. And here, this is when people direct on policy issues directly. And this differs from what we normally see, which is known as representative democracy. So in a representative democracy, people vote for representatives who then enact their will, which is what we have in Kenya. But in a direct democracy, people decide on policies without an intermediary. So in the example of the Occupy Wall Street, they had this thing called the General Assembly, where it was a body where primary decision-making took place. And they were designed to facilitate the formation of consensus, which to him is important. So according to Graeber, this General Assembly system doesn't symbolize the elite history of voting through government, but it symbolizes the history of anarchy. However, I just want to say I don't buy it. This idea of direct democracy, to me, it's too slow. It requires too many voices. If I have to sit, and listen to every single person's opinion before we even get to the process of decision making, by that time, the point may have moved on. We may be dead. There's too much interference. So I love how he writes. I think it's a great story, but the direct democracy, not for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I think, a book is good when you disagree with the concepts that are being put forward in the book, you still appreciate the writing and the research. And we also get to learn a lot from this book. So Graeber, one of the big things that he says in the book, he posits that countries are institutions that were designed to be undemocratic. Now it sounds oxymoronic, but in chapter 3 of the book, he actually gives, and I think you've touched on it too, Jay, he gives a background of democracy. So he talks about the Roman model, he talks about the Greek model, but then he also, being American, focuses on the American model and the American history of democracy. So why are democracies designed to be undemocratic? He says it's because elites all throughout history despise democracy because of the threat of redistribution against their class interests. And that is why, he says, republics around the world have senates where the aristocracy protects the established privileges that exist. And he demonstrates this in the American experience by referring to, he makes a lot of reference to the founding fathers of America, particularly George Washington, who he says was one of the richest men in the country at that time. And so he says that, ironically, the founding fathers of America used the rhetoric of all men are created equal, but their intention was to free themselves from Britain. So that they can be powerful and free, free to be powerful in America. And I remember this, he's echoing, I don't know which book came first, but he also says these words in Debt, the book that we talked about a few weeks ago. So it is for this reason that Graeber proposes another order in America, which is anarchism, that Tujay has said. But that's not the only reason. He has a proof of concept, also Tujay you described, and the proof of concept was through the successful Occupy America movement. That, even though it's not concluded how successful it was, it did have great influence in American politics and in American culture. Much like Tujay, I don't buy it completely because it seems untenable to build consensus, because this depends on consensus and unity of purpose. I will say, however, that anarchism does work when there's an automatic unity of purpose. For example, the civil rights movement. That's an example of anarchism that happened. And why did it happen? Because it was organic. Because it was just generally agreed. And we can also say the same for the Black Lives Matter movement right now, because it's generally agreed that racism is unacceptable, and there are people living an experience where they want to change. And so they want to influence policies directly. They can no longer rely on their representatives to change things for them. So Tuje, you said that earlier on, or centuries ago, it was believed that, especially by the ruling elite, that democracy is actually anarchism. Anarchy. It's anarchy. But isn't that happening now? we are really seeing around the world a deterioration of democracy, and even questioning democracy as we know it, and the model of democracy, and how it is applied differently across the world. So I think his work resonates, but it was definitely a good read that I would
definitely a good
recommend.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Now, one of the reasons, guys, that the Occupy Wall Street, Occupy America movement was so successful was that the movement didn't make any concrete policy demands, like calling for big corporations to pay more tax, for example.
So strange.
Graeber, who was an anarchist, believed that the OWS, as it was called, was successful because of what he calls prefigurative politics, which is a form of utopian kind of campaign that was so vague but so revolutionary at the same time. Now, prefigurative politics was designed to create protests that did not extract concessions from the existing system, but give people an idea of what the world would be like if there was no system. Basically, individuals were free to make their own decisions.
So no government.
No government, right? Now, let's localize this into our own context. You have RUTO, who tells us the Hustler Nation will create their own government. That Hustler Nation, despite that the Hustler Nation,
despite their poverty,
will one day take power. Right, from the wealthy, and chart their own path, and that they do not need godfathers, and they do not need the system. Now, he says that they can do it themselves, and now this is what we would call prefigurative. It is utopian in nature. It's an idea full of grandeur and promise and hope, but in its core, it is simply hot air. What am I saying, or why am I saying this? The bottom-up approach that he speaks about isn't founded on any economic theory, like the lowering of taxes at the middle and the lower income groups to cushion vulnerable groups. What he speaks of is wheelbarrows, water tanks, and hair dryers, which is pure tokenism. But at the core of it is a narrative that is very, very powerful. Now, you might want to ask if RUTO has been reading this book, and I think so. Now, is the violence and deaths that we witness at Kennel the work of an anarchist? Absolutely yes. Now, should we expect more anarchy from hustler narratives? If this book is anything to go by, I think we should expect it.
So this is so ironic, because it's anarchy. From somebody who wants to be the state.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And anarchy in itself is about the negation of the state.
Precisely the point. You give people such a utopian feel of what they feel like they should have, without necessarily having a core that is so strong that they should believe. And that thing is so explosive, and before you know it, he is causing all manner of unrest.
Powerful. So on a day where we did not have a winning headline, but we did have a losing one from the Standard and a winning cartoon from Ozone of the Star. I'd like to leave you with a quote from the late Graeber himself. Make of it what you will. And it says, "Power never gives up anything voluntarily," whether it's power by the people, whether it's power by the states, whether it's power by politicians. Thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're also on your TV screens on Star Times, Go TV, and Pan Free to Air. Have a good evening and see you tomorrow.